As seen in this chart, the Vietnam War can be divided into two phases. The first from 1965 to 1968, when the U.S. troop levels in Vietnam were steadily increased, reaching a maximum of 536,000 at the time of the Tet Offensive. And the second phase, from 1969 to 1973, in which U.S. troops were gradually withdrawn and responsibility transferred over to the South Vietnamese Army, a strategy which resulted in the defeat of South Vietnam in 1975, representing America's first loss of a war. The first phase occurred during a period when happiness levels in the U.S. Congress were on a downward trend from 1907 to 1968. And the second phase occurred when they were on an upward trend from 1969 to the present. In addition, the first phase occurred under President Lyndon Johnson, who, according to psycholinguistic analysis of his speeches and first-hand accounts of his colleagues, such as his press secretary Bill Moyers, had a depressive temperament. According to Moyers, while lying in bed with the covers almost pulled up over his head, Johnson said that he felt that he was in a Louisiana swamp that was pulling him down. The second phase of the war occurred under President Richard Nixon, who had a non-depressive temperament. As seen in this chart, which we looked at earlier, Nixon's use of sadness words in his State of the Union addresses was below the median of the 14 presidents from 1934 to 2018, whereas Johnson's was above the median. The first phase of the war was precipitated by the 1964 Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which was based on incorrect reports of North Vietnamese aggression against the U.S., which Johnson fully realized were false, so he did not overestimate North Vietnamese resolve. Furthermore, the U.S. underestimation of North Vietnam continued up until 1968, when the North launched a massive surprise offensive known as the Tet Offensive throughout the South, in which the North lost half of their forces but succeeded in demoralizing the South. Starting in 1969, under the non-depressive President Nixon, the U.S. gradually began to withdraw its troops and logistical support from Vietnam on the assumption that the war was unwinnable, finally leaving in 1973. This assumption turned out to be based on an overestimation of North Vietnamese resolve, since it was later revealed in the Soviet archives after the Cold War that the Soviets realized that the South would have been able to successfully resist the North if the Americans had merely continued their logistical non-troop support after 1973. Thus, the Americans snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, so to speak, due to their overestimation of North Vietnamese resolve in the second phase of the Vietnam War.